My name is Daniel Marshall. I practice law for a living as well as doing DEI consulting. I am getting a Black Hawk on my arm today, and there are a few reasons why I'm getting it. I have a connection with hawks. I get amused by folks posting pictures of lions and making themselves out to be lions and eagles and all that jazz. The hawk is not at the top of the food chain for birds. It's a little below the eagle, but I just like the idea of the hawk for my current levels in certain aspects of life. Also, the hawk happens to be my favorite private investigator / superhero from a man called Hawk. Look it up if you're not familiar with it.
Relax your shoulder.
Okay. Well, this is my second one. I trusted Alicia with the first one around my birthday time last year, and I was thinking about a second, and went ahead and decided to make it happen rather than continuing to just think about it, you know?
At times we must act.
Yeah, this is true.
Most these sheeple move like clones. That's why I be on my own. My mama thought tats were a joke, but Miss Jackie told me I'm dope. Yeah, I'm dope. Damn right, I'm dope. Miss Jackie told me I'm.
Ashe family, and welcome back to the Honey Dip, where we dip into ink, connections, culture, and community, all through the ancient sacred practice of tattoo. I'm here today with Daniel Marshall, my friend, lawyer, and expert at legal matters, and we're here today to have some conversations that are relevant to you, my people, and what you need to know about the law. All right, let's get into it. So Daniel, my brother, how you doing?
Everything is beautiful. How are you, Alicia?
I am excellent. I just want to start off with just, tell everybody a little bit about yourself, what type of law you practice, what made you interested in law, and how you got to Nashville.
So I just handle a few things on a regular basis. I handle probate matters, like handling matters before the probate court, drafting wills, trusts, etc., litigation with regard to those things. Also within probate, there's what's called conservatorship. That's essentially when someone else has to take charge of an adult because that adult is incapacitated in some fashion and can't handle their own financial, medical matters,
Like the
etc.
Britney Spears thing.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
Though in that case, they were taking advantage of her.
Yeah.
I handle family law matters like divorce, child custody, that sort of thing. I do handle contract litigation and the drafting of contracts. I handle some criminal matters. It's not my favorite thing, but I'll handle matters on a case-by-case basis.
Yes.
Depending upon what comes to me and how I feel about them. But those are the main areas, I would say. Hopefully I'm not, injuries, of course. So those are the main areas. And, when I finished law school back in the day, a lot of people were still doing what's called a general practitioner thing, particularly black lawyers where, if they had their own firm, you come in, and I don't care if you got a basket weaving case, they, would handle it.
They'll take anything, I
But
got you.
now the law is so fully developed in so many different areas through statutory amendments every year, through case law in the appellate court, Supreme Court, and if you're dealing with criminal law, for instance, even federal cases. So it's hard to keep up with a whole lot of different areas at once. So
Yeah,
I
yeah.
find that just limiting my practice to those areas I mentioned is the best practice. See what I did there?
Yeah, I can agree with that. I know that I am bad about doing too many different types of things, and I can definitely understand the benefits of concentrating on a few things instead of trying to spread yourself thin overall, especially with things that change so frequently. But that's cool. I mean, one of the things you mentioned was like wills and things like that for like family planning for the future. How important is it? Can we just stress how important it is to have your affairs in order for our community out here?
So let's talk about the opposite of doing it, which is not doing it. And in that situation, you you're subject to what's called the laws of intestacy for the state. And what that means essentially is that there is a statute that deals with what is going to happen in the event that you die either without a valid will or trust, or you die without one, period. So the one that you put together needs to be valid, basically is what I'm trying to say. But if you die without that, then the state comes in and says, oh, this is how we're going to divvy up the property. And it sets forth, like for instance, let's say you die with a spouse and children, then it's going to divvy it up between that spouse and your biological children. So for instance, common problem I see, if you've got stepchildren and you truly love them and you want them to get the same as what your biological children would get at the time that you pass away, if you don't die with a valid, will or trust, then they're going to be cut out, and it's just going to be the biological children and the spouse. So I mean, that's an example.
Yeah.
And so setting up the proper documentation lets the world know, including potentially the courts, potential creditors, etc., all of the potential heirs. This is how I want things to be distributed upon my passing. When you don't do that, then it can cause chaos with the loved ones that you left behind.
So, what would invalidate somebody's will? Say they wrote it out and they got it somewhere and they actually wrote it or whatever, but what would make it not valid?
There could be a number of things. One thing that I talk to people a lot about, because people wait until they get pretty old to do them sometimes, oftentimes, is that the person who does the will needs to have the legal capacity to do that. What I mean by that is if they are experiencing dementia, that's even okay for them to do a will, but they need to draft it and sign off on it at a time that they're experiencing a period of lucidity.
Yeah.
And so what I suggest to people in that case, if the person's got some dementia, but then they're on point at different times, that you actually do a video of the person where you are asking some basic questions that would tend to show they're in their right mind. So stuff like, medical people talk about oriented to a place, person, and stuff like that. I don't know if you heard of that, but
Yes.
asking basic stuff like, who's the president of the United States? What's today's date? Where are you now? What's your name? Some basic stuff like that, so that in the event that someone tries to contest it and say, well, no, mama was out of her mind on that, by that time, and you don't, then you have your proof that no, this was a period of lucidity. So if indeed it's not a period of lucidity and others can prove that, here's some medical notes that show that she couldn't even,
Drink water.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
That she totally was insane or whatever that time, then that would be a basis to contest.
Gotcha.
People can contest it based upon if they think it's forgery, for instance. So it certainly helps if you, have a notary public, notarized and that sort of thing. But, forgery can be an issue. So those are some examples.
Okay. Well, that's good to know because I didn't even know some of those things. I do have my will. Everybody should have one.
So another thing, it can be that what's being presented as the will is that something subsequently was done that actually is to take precedence over that. So that's another issue that people can use to try to invalidate it.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, let's talk about some things that black people specifically need to know about the law in general. What are things that we should just know before we get into any kind of situation dealing with just the general things?
Well, I mean, so I'm not sure how to answer the question, but to start by saying we need to know what white people know. I mean, we need to know the same things that they need to know. Now, there are some common themes that I see with black clients in certain types of cases that I guess I can discuss. So for instance, again, dealing further with probate, I've seen too many cases where folks receive as an inheritance a house. So the person who owned the house passes away, and the people, whether there's a will or not, the so-called heirs, they they either move into the house or they're renting it out, whatever they're doing. If there's a mortgage on it, they're continuing to pay the mortgage, but they're not announcing to anybody that the person who owned it has passed. And so that's fine until it's not fine, because what can happen is a creditor can open up an estate to try to get paid whatever the deceased owed them. Oftentimes it's medical bills, for instance. It could be a TennCare bill and that sort of thing. And then the heirs are just kind of having to scramble to try to respond. And if you don't do that in time, the court can order that the house be sold, and then the proceeds go to the various heirs and to the creditor. So that's an example of something I see a lot of. Another thing I see a lot of is that, and I mean, different racial groups do it, but I know I see it a lot with black folks, is that after the marital relationship is over emotionally and you're no longer together, just staying separated forever instead of officially getting divorced. And so the potential problem with that is that should one of the spouses come up on some change, property, whatever, then it becomes an issue. Hey, is that marital property? And speaking of like real property, for instance, a lot of times if you're legally married, when it's time for you to try to get property, sell it or whatever, they're going to want your spouse. I don't care if you've been separated from them for 20 years.
Wow.
They're going to want your spouse to sign off on things, because what you're trying to sell or buy could be considered marital property. So those are a couple of issues that I see often. One thing that I hate, with a white hot hate to see with black folks, is when it comes to something called orders of protection. Orders of protection, basically that's a mechanism to go into court and say, hey, I want this person away from me. I don't want them to contact me, be around me, and all that kind of stuff. But when I see black folks, especially beyond the age of 30 or so, because you figure, you get into a bunch of foolish shit, through your 20s or whatever.
Right.
But when you get beyond a certain age and you show up in court in front of everybody, and a lot of times the courtroom is filled. It could be 200 people in there.
Yeah.
And you're doing some stuff that should have been relegated to the 7th grade about this person said this about me, and he said that, she said that, and then they tried to, those kinds of things. I wish that we were better at resolving as adults instead of the Jerry Springer bullshit that takes place in front of everybody.
In a real court of law, too.
Yeah.
Wasting taxpayer time, wasting
Yeah.
monies and your time. And
Yeah.
it's a shame that, we resort to trying the legal action for small things when we could take that same energy and put it into some collective action to help change some problems and fight some bigger legal battles.
Yeah, most def. And so I've found with certain groups, Africans that are an example. I believe people from the Middle East do this too. I can't call all the groups, but certain groups that are into their traditions, ancient traditions, I find that what they do is they basically have like a council to take these kinds of things too. So you might not always agree with what the outcome is, just like you wouldn't agree with it with a judge all the time.
Right.
But there is an internal mechanism for them to go to elders and present, hey, this is what's going on, and then the elders lay down the law. Now, of course, that can be problematic to the extent that you're part of a culture with ancient traditions that believe that women need to be,
Yes.
diminished as persons. So, those are issues. But the extent to which, as people of color, that we can
ourselves.
do, thank you, there you
can
go,
police
police
ourselves.
ourselves, take care of our own stuff instead of taking it out there in the town square, making ourselves look like dumb, petty seventh graders when we're like 45, that kind of thing. I just, I hate to see that.
I can definitely understand. And policing ourselves, like, that's a big idea, but something that we would have done had we not been policed by the powers that be. And why, like, what would we need to even think about doing something like policing ourselves, starting a council of elders or whoever within our own community? Like, from a legal standpoint, do like the cultures who do those things, do they need any like legal precedent
Nope.
to be able to do things
Nope,
like that?
no. It's all internal, and it's all based upon the culture, and people understand that they're subjected to these rulings and these customs because they're part of that community. So a couple of things. So for the what I call the new Americanized Negro, we are so far assimilated into and saturated by the
White power infrastructure.
there you have it, the non-people of color power infrastructure that we often have a very individualistic notion of how we respond to things, and we think we just have full freedom to do whatever we want, but that's not a community concept that each individual can do whatever the heck they want.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
'Cause
And
then
so
everybody, most people would suffer in that case. You have to do what's good for the majority of people most of the time.
yeah, it's like the legs of a centipede, all of them have to be going in the same direction, right? Or what, I mean, so that's what we're dealing with. You got the legs of the centipede as represented by the various folks and black folks in our community, and people trying to go in different directions. And so ultimately you're going in a circle or you're not going anywhere. Some of the legs are breaking off. I mean, that's just, just how it goes. So, yeah, so that's one thing. Give me the question again. There's something else I wanted to
I was just saying, like, was there legal precedent? Like, what are some things that we can do to start?
Counsel, there.
Counsel,
So
yes.
here's my second point, and I like to address these things. It's not popular to talk about these kinds of things. I don't like talking about them, but I like addressing things that need to be addressed.
Yes.
So here's an example. You said something to the effect of, we would otherwise be policing ourselves were it not for how we were policed or something like that. I get that. But I'd push back to indicate that a good example would be molestation. Like, we're in 2023, okay? Stuff happened to folks who were enslaved, who were black folks in America, et cetera. Not that everyone who is black in America is a descendant of folks who were enslaved here, but that's a whole nother Yvonne Van Sertima, they came before Columbus piece. So we're, we won't get into any Yvonne Von Sertima because I don't want you to kick me out of here. But the point, the point I'm getting to is something like molestation, as starting with the family and then branching out, black folks as families branching out to larger communities should and can do things to shut that down now. You don't have to go get a police officer in a
No, you
blue
do
uniform, black uniform, or whatever. You can shut that down. So that's just an example. So in
Yes.
other words, this is not something that at this stage that we can blame on the white man. Like, there are things we can do to police ourselves. There are things we can do to ostracize, to isolate, to and I'm on.
punish.
Well, yeah, all right, Alicia, but I'm on camera.
punish.
I'm on camera as an
Okay,
officer of the
I'm
court.
saying
But
that.
there are things that we can do to directly address some of these things that make it very, 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 very unlikely that these persons are going to do it to someone else.